Target Earth acquired.
Hi, this is Seth Breedlove with SmallTown Monsters, and you're listening to the Monster Guys podcast.
Humans have always been fascinated with the stars and what lives among them. Our oldest stories speak of beings visiting us from above, of impossible objects coursing through the clouds, and of timeless entities manipulating, controlling both time and space. Our stories also tell, however, of the stars' fascination with us. Unexplainable abductions, intrusive visitations, torturous violence, unsettling observations, and strange conversations have both excited and plagued the history of our societies, dividing us at the very core of our beliefs and convictions. Where did this obsession come from? And were we consumed first by our fascination with the stars? Or were the heavens always watching us, visiting, preparing, invading? Further, do these strange and terrifying beings all originate from space above, or have they also walked among us here below? Welcome to Strange September on the Monster Guys podcast.
Initiate terrestrial sabotage.
Welcome to another episode of the Monster Guys podcast. I'm DC McGannon. As always, I'm here with my partner and co-conspirator in all things creative, C. Michael McGannon. Michael, technically, we're not here. We're on break right now.
Oh, I was really wondering where you were going with that. I was wondering if you were going like metaphysical or ghostly or...
No, technically, this being the latter part of September, we're still on a writing break. So if you're hearing this, you're hearing the spirits of our voices speaking.
Okay, so you are going metaphysical.
Okay, now I...
Which I guess is fitting.
Yeah, I guess so. It's been a good month, even though we've been away. We're going to wrap this month up with another very special guest, a returning guest for us on the Monster Guys podcast, a great friend of ours and of the show. Seth Breedlove of SmallTown Monsters is with us tonight, and we're going to be talking about Invasion on Chestnut Ridge, SmallTown Monsters' newest film that's getting ready to drop in just a couple of weeks.
Definitely, and if that name doesn't get you excited, check your pulse.
Listen, it is definitely a full-on invasion. This film has got it all. If you look back to SmallTown Monsters films, typically each film is centered around a single creature, multiple episodes, eyewitnesses, and all that kind of stuff, but it's centered around a single legend or a single piece of folklore. Invasion on Chestnut Ridge has just about every creature or monster or experience you can imagine wrapped up in the same region of the country. I mean, we're talking about Bigfoot, Dogmen, we're talking about Thunderbirds, UFOs, aliens, and that just scratches the surface.
Balls of light.
Balls of light in the fire. I mean, in the fire. In the sky. Balls of fire in the sky. It goes on and on. There's so much more. We tell you that and don't spoil a bit of it with what comes out of this region of the U.S., in Pennsylvania primarily.
Which is, from my understanding, has always been a weird state to begin with. So this ridge apparently is just almost like a portal to another world or something like that.
It really is, and just wait till you hear about the portals in this film. My gosh. So anyway, it's a lot wrapped up in one. We have the opportunity to touch base with Seth. There's also some big things that are happening with their last film, The Mothman of Point Pleasant, and he gives us some insight as to what's coming next, and some super exciting things coming from SmallTown Monsters. Michael, I believe you've used the term or the phrase describing what they're doing, what Seth is doing and his team is doing, as basically modern-day folklorists, doing the work of a modern-day folklorist. And they really are, and they're putting it into a documentation of film. It's there for us to reach in and grab and access at any time.
It is. You know, they definitely make it entertaining, they make it fun, but they have a lot of integrity for the story itself. So it's a great resource for anybody who's wanting to learn about these things. I believe he talks about, you know, the fact that this sort of work is done with the oral history. You know, all of the newspapers and everything of the past, those are useful for us to remember things by, but discovering things, new things or old things, it's oftentimes going and actually talking to people, and that's what they're doing. And that's, you know, that's what people like Lafcadio Hearn and, you know, the Brothers Grimm, W.B. Yeats, that's what they did back then. That's what SmallTown Monsters is doing today.
Yeah, they literally go door to door, knock on doors, get the stories from the local residents, eyewitnesses, researchers, and people that are involved in these cases or the preservation of these cases. This particular film, they've done nothing less than that as well.
So what we're saying is they're not only cool, but they are important.
Definitely. They are cool and important people, and we are excited to talk to them tonight, and specifically to Seth. It's our great privilege, as always, to sit down and chat with him about his films and about the work that he's doing. And tonight, we talk about Invasion on Chestnut Ridge. Again, just bizarre stuff. You'll hear some of it in the interview tonight, but it just kind of cracks the shell open. Just wait till October 20th when this film comes out and you see even more of what he's talking about. And by the way, I don't even know if we got into it in the interview with him, but I do want to say another big round of applause for the artwork in this film as well.
Yeah.
Those guys are doing some amazing both animated art and still art for the storytelling, and they've done it again this time. And the music and the narration, the writing, all of it. Again, just a superb, top-notch job.
Yeah, it really is. Some of it, again, is, you know, entertaining. Some of it, and purposefully so because of the nature of the encounters, it's kind of almost disturbing. I don't want to say difficult to look at because it's not difficult to look at, but
it's unsettling.
Yeah, unsettling would be a good word for it. Good
word
usage there.
Let me just say this. Smiling, waving Bigfoot.
Mangy, too.
And I'm just going to leave it there for now.
Okay.
You'll hear the rest in just a moment. Ladies and gentlemen, let's switch over and talk with Seth Breedlove of SmallTown Monsters. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Monster Guys podcast. We have with us tonight Michael Seth Breedlove with SmallTown Monsters Film Company. Always a pleasure to have you with us, Seth. How are you doing these days?
Good. We're tired. We're heading into our craziest month of the year. I'm doing literally some sort of event or filming every single weekend for the next, I think, eight weeks, something like that.
Wow, and that on top of you've just had a baby. I think the last interview we had with you, your son was just born, like maybe that week or the week before. I can't remember, but you were super tired and you're hot off the heels of, well, I would say that the street is still pretty hot with Mothman, new father. You're right into your next movie. It's about to release here in just a few weeks, and you're not stopping there. Invasion is about to hit, and you've got stuff that is already rocking beyond that. So kind of give us an idea where you're at. What's happening with Mothman? Because there's been a lot that's happened since you've released The Mothman of Point Pleasant, and you're jumping into Invasion on Chestnut Ridge. You've got other stuff going on. What's going on with Mothman? Give us the transition between that and Invasion, and then let's talk Invasion.
Yeah, Mothman came out on June 2nd, and we were actually in Pennsylvania shooting Invasion on Chestnut Ridge when it launched. And the night that it came out, we were sitting in this farmhouse in the middle of Pennsylvania, my crew, and Mark and Andy Matsky and my guys and Zach and Jason and everyone. And we were just kind of watching the Amazon numbers begin to spike. Basically, we had something kind of unheard of from what I've been told by other film companies and guys that work on the business side of film, in that our movie was one of the top selling documentaries on Amazon for an entire month. It was in the top 10 new releases on Amazon for 3 straight weeks. And it was in the top documentaries it's still in the top documentaries, actually. It's shifting back and forth between like 27 and 40. But basically the movie just exploded beyond what we had expected it to, and it drew the attention of some distribution companies, which is something we had been interested in happening for a while. So we did sign with a distributor, which is Terror Films, and they'll be launching the movie into wide release. Actually, they just got with me yesterday and are telling me that the movie will hopefully be out right around Halloween. So just in a couple of weeks here, Mothman should see wide release on like iTunes and Google Play. And they're pitching to Netflix and all that kind of stuff. So hopefully the movie will find a much larger audience. But the reception to it's been pretty great. And I'm still happy with it, which is unusual for me because typically I end up hating the things I do almost immediately. And this was one of the rare projects that we finished, and I'm still pretty happy with how it turned out. So for some reason, we thought it was just a fantastic idea to launch immediately into working on Invasion as soon as that was finished. And we came home from filming Invasion and were actually back in West Virginia about 3 weeks later after finishing shooting Invasion, shooting interviews for the Flatwoods Monster, A Legacy of Fear movie that will be coming out next spring, which will be our official sixth film. And beyond Flatwoods, we are producing a mini-series that's being directed by my buddy Alexander Petikov. That is called On the Trail of Champ. And On the Trail of is a new, it's probably going to be once yearly. SmallTown Monsters is going to produce these mini-series called On the Trail of, and each one will kind of focus on a different subject. The first one is being directed by Alexander. It's about Champ. And the second one will be out in 2019, and probably, it's a little too early for me to announce that one, but I'll be filming that sometime next year. So there's some fun going on for us, but we're staying busy, and we got Case Files launching in November too, which I actually was editing episodes of Case Files today. Case Files is going to be kind of cool. It delves into kind of more in depth into some of the stories that are covered in our films. The first 2 episodes is a 2-parter about Injured Cold. I actually shot an interview with with Woodrow Derenberger's daughter, Tanya. So she actually will be telling the story of her dad's encounter with Injured Cold. Case Files is going to be cool, man. It's going to be like basically a way for me to make mini movies each week during the winter. And we'll do that in a seasonal format once a week, free through YouTube and Amazon Prime.
That is very cool. So in other words, what you're telling us, in the world of SmallTown Monsters, there is no sleep. There's no time to breathe, and there are no breaks in between.
You guys sound like you're exploding right now.
It's, you know what, it's weird. I said to Adrian today, to my wife today, I was like, this is my focus now, so I do this all day, but I don't feel stretched thin or anything. I think I felt more stretched thin when I was working a desk job in addition to this, because some of your time and effort goes into that. But in this case, I can kind of focus on this with Adrian helping on the marketing side of things, which was something that used to take up a lot of my time. It's kind of given me more time to focus creatively on stuff like Invasion and Case Files and Flatwoods Monster.
That's very cool. Seth, let's go ahead and talk about Invasion on Chestnut Ridge. That's your next film that'll be releasing here in just a few weeks. What's the exact date on that?
October 20th.
October 20th, just in time for Halloween. It's going to be a wonderful Halloween stocking stuffer for anybody who needs that. But this movie is a real departure from what you've done so far. In the past, it's been kind of focused on a singular creature or a singular legend, if you will. This movie, I would say, is all the creatures, all the legends, all wrapped up in one. And without giving anything away, I mean, you've got Bigfoot, you've got Dogman, Thunderbirds, you've got Bigfoots coming out of UFOs, you have acorn-shaped UFOs, and that's just the tip of the iceberg, if I can remember. Tell us a little bit about Invasion on Chestnut Ridge. All these creatures, all these legends, all located in this one corner of the U.S., and you just kind of went up there and uncovered it all.
Well, really, the guy who uncovered it all is Stan Gordon, and I remember when I was first getting into like Bigfoot and all this kind of stuff, I listened to Stan talk about his research into the Chestnut Ridge in Pennsylvania. And basically the Chestnut Ridge is this 72-mile wide expanse of mountain range, and it's basically a home to some of the most bizarre kind of phenomenon you can imagine. And I'd always been aware of, you know, the Fayette UFO flap and the Uniontown Bigfoot UFO sighting because of Stan's work into that stuff. But the co-host of my show, Sasquatch, was a huge fan of Stan's work, and when I was deciding on what movie we should do next, one of the things that was informing that was the fact that we had just had the baby, and I knew we didn't want to do anything that was going to be too far away and that kind of stuff. So we had decided on this back when we found out we were pregnant, because it seemed like it would be a good, you know, kind of follow up to Mothman. It's still in that really weird gray area of high strangeness, but it's also in the Appalachians. And so between Mothman and this movie and Flatwoods, we're doing the follow-up trilogy to Bigfoot is called Appalachian Monsters. So this film kind of opens with Kecksburg, the Kecksburg UFO crash, and takes you through all the kind of weird, bizarre history of the Chestnut Ridge over an expanse of, like, in our film, I think we're focusing on maybe like 4 decades, but really it goes all the way back to the 1800s, how long there's been bizarre activity kind of occurring along the ridge. And I think one of the things that informed my style, or the style that we approached the story with, was the fact that I'm a huge fan of In Search Of. I didn't grow up with it, but I'm a huge fan of that show. And stylistically, I wanted to do something that really kind of felt like that. And so that was something we tried to do with this project, was really kind of approach it in the same way that In Search Of was approached, and even stuff like Unsolved Mysteries. So there's a very specific, almost in-your-face style, I think, to this one, especially the longer it goes on. It's a movie that starts in one place and kind of morphs over the course of the runtime until it becomes something completely different by the end.
Yeah, I would agree with that. We just viewed this a few nights ago, and from the very beginning, you really sense a different direction for, you know, storytelling and style and everything, and yet you have maintained your sense of self through it all. So even though it's different and it's very unique and it covers a broad range of creatures, it's still very much a SmallTown Monsters film. And I think fans, new and old alike, are going to appreciate this in a big way.
Awesome. Yeah, that's something I was very concerned about, actually, because the story is so different from the other stuff we've done, and it does really, you know, like, not only do we kind of skip over the typical formula we follow, but I feel like to follow up Mothman with something like this was something we needed to do, because Mothman is a very kind of serious story. It's a very, you know, it's got the tragedy at the heart of it that kind of drives the narrative forward in that movie. And I didn't want to go right back into some sort of, you know, very serious, not that this isn't serious, but you know what I mean, some sort of tragic or very emotional kind of story. So yeah, we did want to approach something else that would be more like an anthology, I think, is what I kept telling Zach when we were kind of planning the movie out. I kept saying it's almost like an anthology, you know, or vignettes. So and a lot of that was informed by, again, like In Search Of and that kind of thing, because that's kind of how some of those shows were approached. And that's what led to the decision to open the movie with like the Bermuda Triangle and Stonehenge and all that kind of stuff. It felt very 70s to open the movie that way.
Yeah, it definitely was. When you opened up with Stonehenge, I sat straight up and I was like, wait a minute, are we watching the right? Wait, what's going on here? What this Stonehenge is not in Pennsylvania.
I was wondering that as well.
I told Michael, I used your words exactly the other night. I said, we were talking about the film afterward, and I said, SmallTown Monster, Seth needed to do this film after Mothman. And so I totally agree with you. And it wasn't a need out of desperation, and you can tell that because, again, your thumbprint is all over this. But it was really, I felt a need to say to the world, we're not a one-trick pony. We don't stay in one corner of the woods. Here we are. It really shined. It was very impressive how you approached it, all the things that you packed into that time frame, and still came out feeling like I was both educated and entertained at the same time. Michael, you had something you were going to say, a question or something there?
I was going to say the same thing. It was very smart. It was very wise to jump to something so different, I think. It also, I don't know, to me, it was something that seemed very tricky. And I guess I would ask, was that a challenge to balance something that you basically almost had to turn into an anthology because this location has so much going on? It's all connected in a way, but, not everything congeals perfectly. I think in the movie it does, but over time, it's such a weird, bizarre set of events that aren't always connected.
Yeah. And hey, by the way, congrats on the engagement.
Oh, thank you.
But yeah, the challenge was, I think I said this, maybe even to you guys, about how the biggest trick with filming Boggy Creek Monster was convincing everyone else that I knew what I was doing. Because, they're all they're following you and you're supposed to be the director. But in truth, like most of the time, I have no clue what I'm doing. Like I come up with a concept for what we're going to do in advance, but whether or not we'll actually manage to pull that off, this is a case, and I talk about this really frankly on the behind the scenes documentary that's going to be on the DVD. And actually that's kind of a cool behind the scenes doc for movies, because of the fact that I was interviewed by the narrator and the writer of the movie. And then I got to interview him, his son, and Zach and Jason. So we're all kind of talking about the making of this movie. During the filming of this, I was being consistently questioned by Brandon, Jason, Zach, and even Mark a little bit, because Mark was there too, about like, how are you tying all this together? Like, we had never done anything like this, and I think it really was kind of worrying to everyone else that was helping to make the movie, because it was like, we're in Kecksburg one day, and later that same day we're interviewing a guy about a Thunderbird encounter, and the crew just wasn't seeing exactly what I was thinking. And Zach says this in the behind the scenes, like he could not figure out how I was going to tie all this together. And a big part of it was the narration being written to do that, so the narration would tie all these different aspects of the story together. But what ties it all together at the end of the day is the Chestnut Ridge. It is crazy to me that the Kecksburg UFO crash happened within like 30 miles of the Uniontown UFO Bigfoot incident, and stuff like that. I think that's really bizarre. So to me, it was always about, let's do this documentary about this one place, and then just pray to God that somehow in post-production we can tie this all together in a way that makes sense to our audience. So, and it was a weird process of editing too, because I'm sitting there, and I don't think with this one that I had any kind of outline in mind. It was more like, let's just go chronologically, start with Kecksburg and end with the orb event that happened to Eric and Dwayne. And along the way, as I was editing those sequences together, everything started to just kind of piece together. If you watch the very first rough cut of this movie, it's actually very similar in terms of like structure, but it is funny to see the kind of like wide open spaces that I left because I had no idea how it was going to tie to the next scene. And then as it goes along, you start to see all these different cuts of the movie start to take shape. This really was an incident or a movie where a lot of it was informed by the direction of the narration and the narration being able to tie everything together. I gave Mark Matsky an outline for the film and kind of would give him direction as far as like this bit of narration needs to make sure it ties this thing to this thing, and here's how you could do that. But Mark really did the lion's share of the work on the writing and tying all of it together. So I can tell you guys, I've never been this stressed making a movie, and it didn't have anything to do with anyone else working on the movie or like my life outside of the movie. It was me trying to sit down and make sense day by day of how this was all going to work out. And even up until now, I'm still stressing over like different little things about it that I noticed that I need to fix, So I'm still tinkering on the movie despite the fact that it's coming out very soon.
Well, let me say, first of all, Mark's writing and his narration accomplishes exactly what you set out for it to. It certainly ties it together. Just an outstanding job on his part, and, a brilliant vision that has definitely come to life on the screen. I know you've said it many times, in chatting with you about this movie, that you were stressed, but I can say as a viewer just sitting down for the first time, it came together and it is a stunning film. I can't wait for the world to see this. I've been so excited about this movie since I first heard about it. I was almost more excited about this movie than I was about Mothman, just because of the scope and the vastness of what you had to pull together. And from a fan's perspective, I never had any doubt that you were going to pull it off. So from the moment we set eyes on it, like I said, when I saw Stonehenge pull up, I was like, wait a second, something's going on here. It kept my attention the whole time. So brilliant writing, brilliant vision. It's definitely come to life. And I believe your stress is just going to melt away with the response of viewers when this thing hits the shelves, so to speak.
Awesome. Yeah, let's hope. It still worries me because it's such a weird it's a weird story. And you don't know how a general audience, the people that kind of liked Mothman, despite the fact it was weird, it was still kind of drawing them in. I don't know how those people respond to a movie where they're hearing about an orb going into a window and, into another dimension or whatever.
Well, it is weird, but you know what? It's relevant and it's timely because these are topics that are really hot right now in a lot of communities, not just one, but cross community. These are topics that a lot of people are talking about and asking questions about. As far as the world stage, I've talked about this to several people recently. We're in a period where people are really looking to the skies. They're looking under the dirt. They're looking in corners. They're seeing these windows open up. They're hearing stuff in politics and on the world stage. People are asking a lot of questions, and they're searching for a lot of answers right now. And a lot of these topics are directly related to a lot of their questions and a lot of their searching. So I think you have a timely film. Yeah, it's weird. Man, it's strange. It's got a lot of stuff in there. And it's really fascinating just from a movie standpoint. But I do think you have a relevant piece of commentary that gives people more to have a conversation about. And I think that's one of your goals. I think that's always been one of your goals as a filmmaker, is to help people in that conversation.
And it's been something that you've done with every single movie. This one, everything is weirder, but you've gone in, you've done your research, and you've really dug deep with some of the stories. The story, and I don't want to give things away in the film, but I think the thing that stood out to me the most was probably one of the smaller stories in this movie, as far as the weirdness goes, where you have and I think he made sure to mention that it was a Bigfoot-like creature, but not necessarily a Bigfoot, that encounters a guy, sticks his head in the guy's car window, and then he waves at the guy as he's driving off. That's bizarre.
Yeah.
But you guys have gone in with every single movie you've made so far and found these very small details that some people may know, but the general public's not going to be able to find with just a quick internet search. And it really deepens the substance of the movie, and it makes it, like DC said, relevant, but also very important. And, you come away watching any SmallTown Monsters movie and you feel like you've learned a lot.
Yeah, that story, Eric told us that story, and I was sitting there grinning ear to ear by the time he was done telling the story, because I could visualize that scene in my head, because I knew I wanted to have Matt Harris draw the Bigfoot, and the idea of a Bigfoot with a Mohawk.
Yeah, that was awesome.
As a child of the 80s, that spoke to me immediately, and I knew it would speak to Matt Harris immediately as well. So I like that story in a way informed the entire tone of the movie, because something about thinking about a Bigfoot with a Mohawk. I was like, if I can get an audience to go along with a Bigfoot with a Mohawk, I can get them to go along with pretty much anything.
Yeah, I think you did good in that.
Seth, let me ask you. Let me circle around to the location, and then I'd like to keep circling on around to the people, which I always feel is a central piece of importance about all of your films, is the people, the stories that come out of them. But this location, the Chestnut Ridge, you said it covers like 70 miles worth of land, and I mean, there's all kinds of towns and cities that are connected to or nearby. In your research and in your filming, you were there, you were on location. Could you find any reason or any connection why this location is such a magnet for all of this kind of activity? Anything stand out to you, or could you figure that out? Why this location?
No, honestly, I really don't. I used to joke, and I hate to even admit this on a show because it makes me sound like a real jerk, but I used to joke around that there's a lot of meth in Pennsylvania, and that's why. I mean, that used to be like that used to be my standard pat answer for like why there's so much weird stuff going on the Chestnut Ridge. But I mean, the fact is, we didn't even scratch the surface. Stan's written 3 books or 4 books about the Pennsylvania Chestnut Ridge. And what we talk about is barely a piece of the overriding puzzle of that area. I mean, there's stuff, our case files episodes about invasion are probably going to be, there's probably going to be hours of material. Because I know Dwayne Pintoff, who talked about the orb, he had probably 45 minutes of his interview was devoted to talking about people he's talked to along the Chestnut Ridge who've run into members of what looked like the Russian military conducting secret exercises in the mountains in Pennsylvania. So, like what we talked about in the movie doesn't even scratch the surface. As for like why this stuff all happens in that one area, I don't know. I thought what Aaron Shakti said about Aaron at one point in the movie says, maybe it goes on everywhere, or maybe it's not all that strange. And maybe it just goes on everywhere and people just don't talk about it as much as they do there or something. It's really bizarre. It is bizarre that so many different kind of phenomena are all kind of centrally located to this one place, this one ridge, where if you look at a map of it and you run your finger down that map, you'll just stop at town after town because of some weird incident that happened, near that town. Kecksburg UFO, Uniontown Bigfoot, it's Greensburg and all these places, Latrobe, Bigfoot sightings and all that kind of stuff. Westmoreland County is just rife with Bigfoot reports, especially in 72, 73. There was a little piece of an interview with Tom Ankeny that we cut out of the movie. Tom used to own an electronics store in Westmoreland County, and he talks about in the interview how he used to actually use the Bigfoot craze that was going on in the area to sell radios, CB radios, because there was so many people were coming into to his electronics store to buy CB radios so they can stay in touch with other Bigfoot researchers, because people were just going out in droves trying to find Bigfoot on the Chestnut Ridge. So people were like CB radioing back and forth, like, hey, we're out, over here looking for Bigfoot. And he used Bigfoot to sell radios in the 70s. That's how big it was there.
My gosh. And the events that really you cover in this film, you said you're just tipping the top of the iceberg there, but you're really only covering about, maybe 5-6 decades worth of activity? This activity goes much farther back in history, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it goes back to the So the 1800s is as far as you can track newspaper articles, and I'm sure there's historians and people who have a little bit more knowledge about the history of the state who could point us toward, sightings that go back even further than that. But the late 1800s, especially, there's all kind of wild man and ape reports around the Chestnut Ridge, and then some older reports, although, nothing too crazy, but I'd say probably 1940s, 1950s, you start finding UFO reports. A lot of this stuff you find out through more of an oral tradition than you do through any kind of devoted, library research or microfilm research or any kind of thing like that. You tend to hear stories from locals. They might not believe anything's happening there, but they'll tell you, my great grandpa claimed he saw a UFO above the ridge back in 1920 and stuff like that. That's how you typically really learn the history of a place. So, I think one of the reasons there are so many researchers in Pennsylvania, and especially around the Chestnut Ridge, is because a lot of these people grew up hearing these stories, and they became fascinated with it and wanted to learn for themselves what the truth behind all of this might be. I think maybe there's so many researchers along the Chestnut Ridge because of the fact they're all searching for answers. And in our movie, we get into the dark side of that with Barry Clark, like what kind of stuff can happen to you just by being a researcher into this stuff.
Yeah, that was very interesting to hear his perspective and his experience and just how deep that goes. And you mentioned Stan Gordon earlier. He's somebody that you talked to quite a bit during the film. I want to kind of switch over to the people side of this. You speak a lot to Stan. Now, does Stan live up in that area now? Is he based in that area?
He's in that general area. Yeah, he's pretty close.
Okay.
I can't remember the exact town he's in, but he's close enough that that's where I'd say that's kind of his domain. I mean, he spends more time there than probably anywhere else.
So we get to meet this guy who has spent so much time researching and writing books during the film. There are a lot of other people. Barry Clark, there's some others throughout the film. Just like typical small-town monsters, we get to meet the people who are there, who are in the thick of it. In your time filming and talking to these people, can you give us a story or two that stands out to you that, whether it's on screen or off screen, that really touched you or moved you or said, this is what it's all about, this is where we're going with this film? Can you pull any of those out from memory?
Yeah, I mean, just the people we interviewed is something that sets this movie apart from our others, because the others, we typically try to talk to a lot of locals and a lot of witnesses. We're not big on researchers and investigators. They're always a component to the movie, but it's not predominant. The predominant interviews are typically with locals and witnesses. And this movie is almost entirely researchers and investigators. But the cool thing about that to me is these are all people who've had their own experiences other than someone like Stan. So yeah, the biggest story for us, the one that kind of set this apart from everything else, was Barry Clark. Barry really informed kind of the direction of the entire movie. Barry, what I wanted to get across in Barry's interview was more so than simply let Barry tell his stories. I wanted people to actually feel what we felt sitting and listening to Barry talk. And I don't know if it came across as well as I would have liked it to, but there's a reason we didn't really cut too much when Barry's talking. Most of the interviews in this movie have two cameras. They're cutting a lot. Barry's interview doesn't cut hardly at all. If he's talking, he's just talking to the camera. And Barry talked about a missing time experience that he had after investigating a UFO sighting back in the 70s. And he had this missing time experience. And after that, his life started kind of not going out of control, but the really dark, bizarre things started happening to Barry. And in the movie, we got a little bit of that into the movie, but Barry actually had us shut the cameras off. And he told us a story after the cameras were off that really freaked everyone out that was there, from Zach and Jason, who usually aren't moved by this stuff, to me, Mark and Andy, and it really unsettled all of us. And that story and kind of Barry's attitude about the entire thing kind of made me think about the story in a different way. I think originally my ideas for the tone of this movie were informed much more by like, let's just have it be a fun kind of, anthology movie, kind of spooky, fun kind of story. And after talking to Barry and hearing Barry's story, it pushed the tone a little bit further toward like the dark side of things. And I think it's still kind of a fun movie, and it's spooky and all that stuff. But I definitely wanted Barry's story to help push the story in a darker direction, because it was obvious that this really affected him. So Barry's story about his missing time experience and the investigation that he was a part of out at Bell Farm. He was called to a location called Bell Farm, and what we didn't get into in the movie is the fact that Bell Farm was a location where all sorts of weird stuff was going on in the 70s. There were UFO sightings and strange orbs and screams in the night and all kind of stuff. And he got called there one night because these people had said that there was a star that would appear in the sky at this one specific time every night. And so Barry went out to check it out for himself. And when he gets there, sure enough, this really bright star appears in the sky. And as they're watching this star, the star would turn blood red, which in itself kind of creeps you out. The star would go from silver to blood red. And when it would turn blood red, all these tiny little silver objects, I think is how he called them, but lights in the sky appeared around the bright star and kind of went to it. And the way he referred to the little lights was that they were like bees going to a beehive. And they go into this bright star, and then they notice that the bright star is getting brighter. And they realize it's actually coming down toward them. And it unsettled them so bad that they all got in the truck and ended up leaving, because this thing was actually like descending toward Bell Farm, toward them. So that's probably my favorite kind of story in the film. Obviously, the Uniontown Bigfoot UFO story is a famous one as well, and that's one that's the focal point of the movie. That's the actual centerpiece of the film, is the Uniontown Bigfoot story, which was told by the witness, whose name was George Kowalczyk. And George had this encounter one night in a farmer's field outside of Uniontown, PA. He was with two younger boys. They were in this field. There was a bright object in the sky, and seemingly out of the object, these two large Bigfoot-like creatures appeared. And they walked toward the boy and George, or the boys and George ended up firing a rifle at them. One of the creatures reached up and seemingly stopped the bullet with its hand. There was a flash of light. The two creatures turned around and walked back to the craft, or where the light was in the field, and seemingly disappeared. But the story doesn't end there, even though it does in our film. There was more to that story, including another encounter with the UFO later that same night. We talked a little bit, Eric Altman talked a little bit in the film about how the ground was still glowing from where that UFO had landed that the two creatures came out of. And a state police officer actually backed that story up and said that ground really was glowing when he arrived. George really was set off by that incident. It seemed to kind of send him over the edge. And we talked a little bit about that as well in the film. I mean, I think there's an underlying theme to this movie about the kind of lasting effects some of these encounters have with the people that, witness them. Even someone like Eric Altman and Dwayne, who had their encounter with the orb in the woods that went into that weird window, it still affects those guys today. So I don't think I have one single favorite out of all these different weird stories, but I'm a big fan of the interview we did with Barry Clark. And I can tell you, I've never been so unsettled by an interview. And I wish I could tell you guys Barry's story, because it really is the story he told us when he had us shut the cameras off. It's one of those stories that's made me question a lot of things for myself. And it was one of those things that really makes you think. And if you're a skeptic and you talk to someone like Barry, it'll make you question what exactly Barry experienced.
That's powerful. It's powerful stuff, and it certainly comes across in the film. I mean, Invasion on Chestnut Ridge is unsettling in and of itself. I can't even imagine, off screen with someone like Barry, what you would have had to hear to make it even more unsettling. But it's powerful. I think you've got all the elements of creepy and spooky, even humorous to just downright scary, all wrapped up in this film. In my opinion, Seth, for what it's worth, you've done it again, and you've done it in just unbelievable and wonderful fashion. SmallTown Monsters crowns itself once again, I think. I'm beginning to get the sense with each and every film now that you don't have to necessarily look to outdo the last one. You're just getting better as a storyteller and a filmmaker, and every one of these films are standing out on their own merit. I believe that speaks volumes to where you are and where your company is, and I'm proud to have been given an opportunity to see it ahead of time. I'm going to tell you, listeners, this is a film that you must see. I think what makes it even more cool is the time of year it comes out, just before Halloween. And if you truly want something stranger, you need to watch Invasion on Chestnut Ridge. Kudos to you, my friend. High praise from the Monster Guys. This is an exceptional piece of work, and I can't wait for people to see it.
Awesome. Thank you.
And I know you've mentioned to us briefly about Flatwoods Monster. You're filming that for next year on the Trail of Champ. Give us where we need to go to get our hands and our eyes on Invasion when it comes out October 20th. And is there anything that we need to prep for with all this other stuff coming? What do you want us to look for next? So tell us where to get Invasion and then what's next.
Yeah, the Invasion will be available on Amazon, and I would hope Vimeo on demand when it comes out, as well as DVD through shop.smalltownmonsters.com. Pre-orders are open for Invasion, so if you want to get it on the release date, your best bet is to pre-order it through shop.smalltownmonsters.com. Immediately after the movie comes out on October 20th, we'll launch Case Files at the beginning of November, and that'll open with a two-parter about Injured Cold and be available through our YouTube channel and Amazon Prime. After that, the next thing will be the Kickstarter for our 2018 output, and that will launch on January 26th this year is when the 2018 Kickstarter. The Kickstarter will actually be to fund the post-production of Flatwoods Monster on the Trail of Champ, and it will be funding all of the production of Bray Road Beast, which is going to be the 7th SmallTown Monsters movie.
Oh, you just gave us an inside tip right there. Very good. A lot to look forward to. Congratulations to you again, both with your family, with your baby boy, and all of these films and the production that's coming out. We're very excited to see it all. Congratulations, Seth. And again, a wonderful job on Invasion. We can't wait for everybody to see this. As always, it's a pleasure to have you on the Monster Guys podcast.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Thank you very much.
It's always a privilege to speak with Seth and SmallTown Monsters about the work that they're doing. Thanks, Seth, for spending some time with us again here on the Monster Guys podcast. As always, we hope you enjoyed this episode. When we come back from our little writing hiatus in about another week or so, we're going to come back with a whole nother series called Monsters Among Us, about real live monsters in our world for our series that will carry us through October. Of course, remember, we've got a Friday the 13th in October. Invasion on Chestnut Ridge comes out in October. Stranger Things 2 comes out in October. We make some big announcements in October. Halloween is in October this year, Michael.
Things in October.
So, October is just going to be a fun month all around. Get ready, folks. Let's make it a big one. Send us your photos. I would say your videos, but I don't know if I want to see those, but at least your photos of your costumes and you in action at Halloween or in preparation this month for Halloween or in October. We look forward to hanging out with you and talking with you more online. So as always, you can find us at themonsterguys.com, on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at The Monster Guys. We love chatting with you and interacting with you, and certainly appreciate you taking the time to hang out with us. Stay in touch. In just a few days, we start a new series and we jump into the most wonderful time of the year. Thank you guys. Good night.
Good night.